Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this session on relocating in the job search. My name is Jodi Hammer, and I am the Career Services Specialist here at the National Peace Corps Association. And I'm excited to be here today to talk with you about this topic. It's obviously a topic that's of great interest to RPCVs in particular, right? Because being a returned volunteer, we've all, we've lived abroad. We oftentimes have a passion for, international, travel, and maybe even dream of living abroad or living somewhere else, and things like that. So, we're going to talk about what it is and when it makes sense to relocate and how to go about doing that today. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So why do people relocate? That's my first question for you, and I'd love for you to just drop into the chat box any answers you might come up with. I really want this to be as interactive as possible, so I appreciate you dropping those in, and thanks so much. And I apologize that it's not more that I can't be seen. Unfortunately, there's a computer issue for on my laptop here, so it's not preventing me. It doesn't prevent me. It doesn't allow me to be on camera. But anyone who is willing to be on camera, that's great too. But please just put your comments into the chat box now if you can. If you have any ideas of why are you considering, or why have you considered relocating, or why have you relocated in the past? What have the reasons included? So that's what I'm looking at, getting at here. So okay, let's see what we have. Anyone in a chatty mood here to weigh in? And if not, I'll go ahead and share some that I have. Great. Kinsey, thank you. So greater opportunity or greater availability of job opportunities in a particular place. Absolutely. And Kinsey, that's really true. Oftentimes, industries, right? There are certain industries that have sectors that they're really strong in, right? I think of the Bay Area and technology, right? They're very strong in tech, in the San Francisco, San Jose, that whole area. But other things like international development is oftentimes based, the international headquarters of U.S. ones is oftentimes based here in D.C. So it really depends in part on what you want to do, what kind of work are you hoping to seek, and you can research that. If you're looking for your specific kind of job, you can look and say best locations, for whatever, fill in the blank, whatever your industry is, and you can consider those, right? Not everyone wants to relocate, but certainly that's something to factor in, right? Anything else come in the chat box? Let's see. Proximity to friends and family. That's a huge one, Sarah. A lot of people are looking to maybe go back. They've been, on this adventure with Peace Corps, or, post Peace Corps, doing some things. And now they feel the need or the desire to get back to their maybe family. Maybe it's because their parents are getting older and they want to be able to help. Maybe it's just, you want to reconnect with, your family where you grew up, whatever the case may be. That's a great reason, and a very understandable one in the job search, right? I will talk later about, how to explain to employers, why you are looking to relocate, because that is a question that will inevitably come up in general, right? And how you can address that is what we're going to talk about as well. Anything else? Oh, desire to live in a new geography. Yes, the wanderlusts in us, Jesse. We love to, go and explore new cultures and new areas. So that's absolutely, a reason. And we'll talk a lot about, how do you go about making sure that's a good move for you? I mean, sometimes things can seem very exotic, and oh, I would love to live there. They have this. It's so cool. And without doing a lot of research, and without, you might make a decision that's based on just what you perceive from afar, and it could be very different. So but that's a very good one, and a good reason to relocate. Great. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to show you some more reasons that I came up with, and you're welcome to continue putting some more reasons that you see up in here as well. So um, let's see, reasons. So a new job, sometimes you're relocating for a job offer or for a job transfer, right? Maybe, you've done a really good job in your organization, and they've offered you this, great, advancement. It's a, promotion, and it's in, somewhere far away. So that may be one of the reasons that you relocate. And there's a lot that you want to factor into making that decision as well, right? Is it, the right decision for you? Will you be happy in the environment? Those kinds of things. What's the culture like, there, all of those kinds of things. Another big reason is, you know, a spouse or partner, who gets a new job. And that's a huge thing, right? I am married and have a child, and if one person, if one of us gets an exciting, amazing job that's in this new location, you've got to factor in whether that makes sense, and you might be, relocating because of that. And so how to spin that in your application and such as well, right? Better career opportunities, which we already talked about. Yes, you might have an area of the country that's much better, and there might be just more opportunities in general, right? You know how there's hot spots in the states where, oh, there's a lot of jobs in general. Sometimes, that's important to be able to maybe be flexible and move to some of those areas to get into an economy that might be better than maybe in another area. A certain industry is tanked, and so if you're living in that industry and it's really tough, you might want to relocate, right? We already covered the family one, and friends will add to that. Better lifestyle, and or things like education system. If you have a family, you might be thinking really about your child, right? And getting to a place that has a really quality education program, right? Versus some maybe school districts that you're in that you're not as happy with, right? So there's all of those. Part of the better cost of living does come down to as well, low right your lower cost of living, right? The better lifestyles in part, where it's not so expensive. I mean, there are areas that are so darn expensive, and the positions don't always pay, significantly more. They might pay more, certainly, but it's you can live a lot better oftentimes in an area that has a lower cost of living because your money goes further, right? So that can be a big draw for people, absolutely. Let's see, fulfilling a lifetime dream. I mean, how many of you, and just certainly weigh in here if you'd like, how many of you have a dream of where you would ideally love to live, or some kind of, I've always wanted to live by the mountains of Colorado. That's one of mine, right? Anyone else share that with me? I'm curious, and if so, just dump it in the chat box. Where's your lifelong dream location? All righty. And my chat box keeps disappearing, so I'm not really seeing very much of what you're saying. But feel free. We have a pretty small crew. I'm happy to allow you to just unmute as well if you would like to, say something. So you can certainly do that as well. Let me just see if I can get this. There it is. All right. So I live in a small town. I'd like a bigger city, Kinsey. Yeah, that's a common one, right? And with bigger cities come things like more culture opportunities, right? There might be theater that you love, or the whatever music scene, or things like that in a bigger city. So I totally can relate to that as well. So wonderful. All right. So suffice it to say, there's a lot of reasons why people want to relocate. So then it comes down to, how and when do you relocate, right? It's not a small task. I mean, relocating in general it's a big undertaking, right? Where you have to really think clearly and think ahead, and like do your checklists of, okay, things to do in a relocation, you've got to notify companies, all of that kind of stuff, just the actual move itself. But we're going to really be talking more today about the relocation in the context of a job search. So we're going to talk more about, like, when does it make sense to you to relocate? And there's advantages and disadvantages of each, right? Before or after you get a job. Some people have share a philosophy or think, okay, I'm just gonna get to the new place, get settled in so that I'm already there. I'm where I want to be there. So I'll be local. I'll be a local candidate, which can have advantages in the perception of employers, which we'll talk about in a bit here. Other people are maybe more comfortable with, getting a new job, beforehand. Now, if you're working already, you have a job, the majority of people will continue working that job, but be looking for another job just so that they can maintain that income, right? That without completely putting, like just leaving with no other job lined up seems like a risky transition, right? And in some ways, right? In many ways. So people tend to stay in their job while they're doing the job search, and then hope to get something else and then relocate for that. Now there are times where maybe you are so miserable in that job that you just really need to get out of it. I mean, there are times where you find yourself in a job that's just not a good fit, or maybe the managerial style is just not conducive. You just don't gel with it. It's just you're miserable and it's impacting your physical and mental health. In that case, it might make sense for you to leave that job before you actually have something else lined up. That can definitely happen. And we're going to talk about, okay, so what are the pros and cons of that? What does that mean? What do you need to be careful of if you are going to be doing a job search and considering moving before having a job lined up, or versus staying where you are. Now there's a third group, though, that are the folks that are in a job search. So whether or not you're here or there, you're doing a job search. So does it make sense to move to a new location, and then so you're local there, whatever, and do your job search from there, or to stay where you are until you find a job? And let's face it, in today's day and age, you can do so much remote job seeking. In fact, today it's a little bit different than in the normal pre-COVID era. um, Today, everything's being done, right? Pretty much everything's being done virtual. So whether you're, living 5 miles from the location of where the business is located, or 500 or 5,000, it doesn't really matter in terms of how you apply, and the, all of that, the hiring process and all of that. So it's maybe a little bit, I would say, easier in some ways now that everything is, virtual. But we are going to talk about how do you put that, how do you incorporate your desire for that you're the fact that you are relocating, or things like that. How do you make a case for that, so that the employer doesn't look at you as like, oh, they don't really know the area. And we'll talk about some of those pros and cons here. So that's what we're really going to spend time on here. I'm going to go to the next one here, and just next slide. So relocating before getting a job, right? You don't have a job, you're doing a job search, and so there's advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of relocating to your new place is that, let's be honest, in general, in normal times anyway, right? Local candidates have an advantage. They're considered, less of a flight risk, or they already know the location, they know the community, they're already integrated. So there's less of a chance of them saying, "Oh, I don't like this. I thought I would." Right? They already know the community. They're already there. So the advantage of getting to the location that you're at is you are then, you have your local, you have your address there. You are already a local for all practical purposes, right? So that can help you, right? It's also, again, in regular times, especially, it's easier to tap into local networks, right, and opportunities by getting involved in, whether it's, getting involved with your local, RPCV group, right, your local return volunteer group that has a chapter there, or tapping into maybe some of the passion areas that you have, even volunteering on a volunteer basis, right, to learn about opportunities and get connected with the community. Because in today's day and age, many of a good percentage, the majority of jobs, people learn about through people telling them, like referrals or contacts, your network, right? Not just, in the old days, it was, it used to be, the jobs listings in the newspaper, for goodness sakes, right? Now, there's still a lot of online jobs boards, and I urge you to take advantage of those, because there are some really good ones, right? That can be very helpful in looking for jobs. But you don't want to just depend on that. You really want to network regardless of where you're living. But once you're in a new community, my point is, you can network with the local community oftentimes easier in some ways. Um, the disadvantages is relocating is expensive, right? Or it recovers, it requires some savings, right? Or some kind of, okay, I'm going to go to this brand new place where, I may not have friends and family to stay with temporarily. That ups the expense a lot, right? If you have friends, family, whatever you can stay with, that makes it a lot easier to do a relocation before getting a job, because you can stay with them. Bonus, you can use that local address, right? You have an address, then you put that on you know, your resume and such, and that makes you look like a local already, right? So that's good that you can do that, but it's the disadvantage is if you don't have that, it's expensive, and you need to kind of really be thinking about, like, how much you want in a savings. I usually tell people you want to think about you want to really ideally have some kind of not a slush fund, but like an emergency fund, right? Or, ideally before you relocate to a new area without a job, if you're thinking of doing that and it's not as easy to do it from afar and you really want to get there and you are working, let's say, you'd want to start saving a little bit of money so that you can have that kind of, emergency, the funds to get to the new place, to set up, whatever you need to set up, whether it's, getting an apartment, that's, those kind of things are quite expensive. So oftentimes, in the industry, they'll recommend, if possible, if you have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of whatever expenses you're going to have. And that's going to depend, the expenses that you're going to have are going to depend on what your resources are there, right? If you have free rent somewhere, that brings down your, monthly expense drastically, right? So you will need less. But having that 3 to 6 months so that you have a cushion, if you will, because you're not, I mean, I don't think it's realistic to expect that you're going to automatically get a job. You're gonna be able to move to a place and get a job in 2 months, or 2 weeks, a month, whatever. It might take longer. And so be prepared for that. Okay. Not to be, focusing on the negative, but focusing on the reality that it can take some time. So you want to be prepared. Okay. Great. Let's see. The Before we go on, I just noticed there's a question in the chat box. I want to say, oh, Sarah, The Atlantic, okay, has an article about moving to a dream place, how that can improve happiness. Absolutely, that makes total sense to me, right? You're moving to your dream place. This is the place that you would love to be for fill in the blank, whatever the reasons are. You love nature, you love hiking, you love the beach, whatever that is, and doing those kinds of things are obviously right. I mean, that makes sense that it improves your happiness, which importantly, Sarah, and thank you for sharing this. I will definitely check this article out after we finish this. Um, Interestingly, when you're in that more positive mode and you're happier as a person, that impacts the way that you come across to professionals, right? In the job search, in networking, right? I did a whole webinar about a week ago on maintaining optimism in the job search, and the future is bright, it was called. And of course, the timing of this just happened to be, in probably the craziest week that I've had since starting, this job with NPCA, where you had the storming of the Capitol, and then a lot, that just sucked people into a lot of different things, right? And then a complete system crash where just trying to get things ready for the noon webinar, and it all came together. And I just laughed about it, but it's true. It, like, maintaining that positive in light of issues is important. But boy, it certainly helps when you're living in a dream place where you are so happy to be there and you're appreciating and taking, honoring your commitments and your, what you like, what makes you, what brings you joy, right? That can really impact positively on your job search. So thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And I think that's really important to put in there, to maintain that regardless of the approach that you take. Okay. So let's when to relocate. Well, we're talking a little bit more then on the before or after a job, right? As I said, the it depends on your finances, right? So do you have that cash reserve, right, to help you get settled? And I already made that point there. Do you have that place to stay cheaply while you're getting your feet on the ground? Now, if you don't have cheaply or free, right? If you don't have family or friends that you can crash with cheaply, be creative on trying to explore other opportunities. Now, certainly right now with COVID, I'm not recommending necessarily, right, that you like look at couch surfing or, whatever. But eventually, once this ends, right, and it will, the optimist in me, and it will end. We will get through it. You might explore some of the creative, well, in addition to looking at like people who might have, rooms for rent, there is couch surfing, rooms for rent. You can put the note out to your network to say, hey, well, now this depends. If you are doing a job search, you're not in a current job. If you're in a current job and you're trying to do like a discrete job search, you're not going to want to announce to the world on Facebook, I am relocating to this place, because then your old job probably finds out that. So be discreet. And again, there's another webinar on that. If you go to the Global Reentry web, our playlist on YouTube, and there's one on, conducting a discrete job search. But depends. If you're doing a full-on job search and you don't have a job right now, you don't need to keep it secret from anyone that you're unemployed, that you're looking for a job, right? You want to tell everyone. So in that case, putting a note out on your whatever you're using, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, letting your connections know that, hey, I am in the process of contemplating a move to XYZ. If you want to learn more about the place, and to see if it really is a good fit, or if you have decided, you've already done that and you want to move, to say, hey, does anyone have any contacts that live in Denver, Colorado, where I'm hoping to relocate there, and I'm wondering if you have any contacts that might have leads on, either, free or reduced, greatly reduced rent, just while I get my feet on the ground and get a job, lined up, that kind of thing. So people can, I mean, you have no idea how it's that whole 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon, the whole, if anyone remembers that conversation about that, where you are connected to so many people, right? You have your first degree connections that are like your friends, your family, on Facebook, for example, right? Then you have all of the friends of your friends that you're connected with that are kind of your second degree connections, right? That you think of LinkedIn language, that's your second degree connections. There's a lot of people in that, and you might even discover that somebody that in your network, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that you moved to Denver. Maybe you haven't been in touch as much lately, right? That kind of thing. So you could really potentially unearth some other options, some good free or reduced rent options and other things. Okay. Networking, other leads on jobs, right? In terms of, I'm really interested in the energy sector, and da 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 da. If you know of any, leads, please feel free to send them my way, that kind of thing. Okay, so great. So let's talk a little bit about how to address the relocation, like in your application process, right? So in your resume, right? You can consider using a local address, right? If you but right here, the sample here shows where you show current address, and then you show relocating and whatever the month, year, to the new place, right? You could certainly do that. Okay, that's one way to do it, and that's very upfront, and that's good. Now, um, because your other option would be to just use the local address in the new area, right? That you have, if you have a local address, friends, family that you're staying with there, whatever, right? This is like you are moving there. That is your address. You just are not there yet. You are in the process of moving there. That's your local address. The reason why some people do that, a lot of people do that, is to get around that employer bias against the non-local, which sometimes, you really do have that, right? Because for the employer that's hiring, it's a really expensive process, right? To hire somebody, to bring somebody new in costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time. So they want to make sure to get somebody that is going to have the best chance of really like sticking with it, right? They don't want to hire somebody who like gets there and says, "Oh, I thought I would like this city. I don't like it," right? So they see you as not as much of that local yet, right? So using that local address in where your target place, where you're in the process of moving to, you could certainly use that as your address. Now, you could alternatively put like this, but you could also do another thing, and I don't have a picture of this or a screenshot, but you could leave your address off altogether. That's an option. Or put just the city and the state, Denver, Colorado, whatever, that, like, people do all of those things now. It's not as important as it used to be to have your full mailing address, right? They used to send correspondence through the mail, right? I mean, that's really hard for us to even fathom these days, because of course they'll just send it by email. It's fast, it's direct, it's, all of that, right? So so those are some of your options, right? And you could, and you'll also put that in some other parts you can in the application. But this is in the resume where you can put it if you choose to include and really spotlight that, right? Now, when you put relocating as of, then it kind of shows commitment to a timing, like you are coming there. So that's good. Or just using the local is fine as well. So okay, let's go on to in your cover letter. So in the cover letter, you can explain more, your cover letter. And if you don't do a cover letter, I would highly encourage you to reconsider that. Doing a cover letter can really help it's more of that personalized messaging to the employer versus in your resume, let's face it, you're usually doing like, fragment sentences starting with, I recommend starting with your active ed, action verbs, right? So instead of full sentences, you don't use I in your resume, but generally in your cover letter, that is where you are using, you're speaking in that first tense and you're using I, and I will be relocating to wherever, da, 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 in, and you can explain in there, your story. Now strong stories include, things like, if I will be relocating, with, you could mention it's for, to be, closer to family. Then it's like, oh, they're kind of from here. That could be a good one, right? If that's the case. So it just allows you to kind of more address it, right? But addressing your commitment, not just really making sure that, there that you can communicate in that cover letter that you're excited about this opportunity, because not only does it, is it, require the XYZ skills, or it's, it would allow you to really utilize these skills, da, 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 da. It's also in Denver, Colorado, where you are relocating. You're excited to be relocating as of, and you put that date in. So it's more of a given. It's more of a, I am relocating. They're not, yeah, I'll relocate for the job. I'll relocate for any job, and be wary of that as well. And I'm not sure if I dropped this in a slide, but one tip I want to give you with, that I'll locate anywhere for a job, or I'm open to locating anywhere for a job. That makes you sound desperate, not flexible, right? That can come across as, oh my gosh, they're, they must really need a job. And then you're not necessarily taking the job for the right reasons, right? It's because you have to have a paycheck, versus maybe, you're really excited about it being in this area, and your skill set, all of that. So great. And again, you can use your local address in your, cover letter if you want as well. So don't worry about a local phone number. You don't have to change that, because honestly, most people don't change their phone numbers these days, and it doesn't matter. There's no need to really. You can, people just assume you keep the same number, because it's a pain to change it, right? So absolutely. So, are there any questions so far about either, how to incorporate it into your application process when you're doing that? If there are, feel free to, you could either, dump it in the chat box, or, just unmute yourself and share your question. Let's see, anything. I don't see anything in here coming in, but feel free to put them in, as we go forth here. Just, drop your questions into the chat box is absolutely fine. Okay. Let's go on then a little bit and talk about, so if you are going to do that job search, from, doing a long distance job search, right? You know where you want to relocate and you're gonna move, like you're committed to that. But doing that long distance job search, a couple of the tips here, and these are actually from, and I've expanded on them, but from the Muse, which is one of my favorite resources for career tips and such. Some of them, like, allow plenty of time, and I've already talked about this a little bit. Finding a new job is not something that's just a sprint. Where you're gonna, like, generally, there are exceptions, but generally you're not going to be looking at like applying for a job and hearing back next week, interviewing and being hired, so that it's all within a couple weeks or a month even, right? It oftentimes takes longer, and it depends on your industry as well. Federal government tends to take even longer, right? Um, so don't give up on that either. Just know that allow that it's gonna take some time, okay? Thinking local for the job opportunities. So you really want to tap into that local, network that I was saying, for those job opportunities, to find out from the locals what kinds of jobs are most prevalent here. Or if you have a specific industry, how, trying to set up, some career chats. I talk a lot about career chats instead of um, informational interviews. I don't like the term informational interviews. It just sounds, it sounds long, like, oh my gosh, I'd love to, but I don't have an hour to talk with somebody, right? Career chat sounds a lot crisper, right? It sounds, I usually say, wondering if you might have, you might say, I'm in the process of relocating to Denver, and as such, I'm conducting a job search, long distance, from afar, but I'm looking to really connect with people who work in professionals working in the fill in the blank, whatever, arena, and and wondering if you might be willing to chat with me in a maybe for 15-20 minutes in a career chat to just share a little more about your own experience and any tips or advice you might have about the job search specific to the market in whatever city, right? So it's that, like, getting them, they're much more on board if it's a shorter type of amount, and you might end up getting longer time, but don't assume that, right? Don't ask for 20 minutes and then go in and just plow through thousands of questions to get, and it takes an hour. That's not professional. What you want to do is, when you are doing that, informational chat, via Zoom, via whatever, right, phone, limit it to that. When you start approaching that, like 15 minutes or close to the 20, to actually say, goodness, I realized that I asked for, time flies, and I realized I asked for 15 to 20 minutes of your time, and it's getting close to that. So I certainly understand if you need to wrap up after this next question or something like that. They may very well say, oh, don't worry about it, I don't have anything until noon, that's okay, and give you more time. That's great. But regardless, they're going to walk away from that going, wow, that person was so professional. They thought of me, my time, they valued it. Like, that's the kind of impression you want to give to somebody that you're doing that, career chat with, right? And take the advice that they, share and go with it, right? And all of those kinds of things. And again, I'm going to be doing probably another one on, like, doing career chats and informational interviews, but we have a sample for you to look at as well. You can always look at the webinar on that. But that can really help, right? Getting them to share their network of people. An easy way to do that in the end of a career chat is, as one of your final questions, you might ask them, if you were in my position right now doing a job search in this arena, who are the two or three people or organizations you would definitely connect with? And I can tell you, they're gonna come back with, probably, oftentimes they won't come back with people. They'll say, "Oh, you've got to check out DAI and this organization. They're great." And you're just, don't stop them. Just go, "Oh, great, great," and just be writing down, like, as many of those that they're saying. Right? You just get them down, because that's really valuable information. You can follow up later. But then the key follow up question for that is to say something like, wow, this is a really great list. I'll definitely follow up on these. I'm wondering if you by chance have any contacts at any of these organizations who might be as gracious as you've been to spend 15-20 minutes of their time chatting about their own experience. So you're basically asking them to refer you to one of these people or a couple of these people, right? That's a really nice, very professional way to ask, again. And so it gets them more to that specific. So that can be really helpful. Okay. Wonderful. So, signing up for job alerts. Yes, find out, some of the some organizations or job boards will have, like USA Jobs has a job alert where, you can sign up to hear about, you want to get a posting of available resources in this, maybe a certain agency, or whatever, and they'll send you those job alerts, right? Similar to some of the other, there's so many out there, right? And you can do actually a Google on, best job search, listservs for fill in the blank, whatever organization, whatever area of the country, or city, state, wherever you're going, right? The region. That can be very helpful as well. And you can get those job alerts, and that way it does the work for you to some degree, right? You don't have to suss through those thousands of vacancies for, and most of the listservs now have where you can tailor by location, you can tailor by industry, so that you don't have to filter through, you don't have to go through all of them. Okay. Great. Are there any questions anyone has so far? I'm just encouraging you to, again, drop them in the chat box, if you do have any questions. All right. Let's see here. So let's look at being available to interview, obviously, right? If you're unemployed, you're going to be pretty available, right? It's when you're employed that sometimes it's a little difficult to get that interview scheduled, but people understand, and you certainly can get it done as well. Being available, whether it's an informational interview, right, or a interview for a job, that kind of thing. If you're remote, then, if they contact you and say, hey, we'd love to, again, this is in normal times. Right now, it's all virtual, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you are doing a job search in the future and you were using that local address and you happen to still be in the mode of you know transitioning to that new location, and they call you and say, hey, we'd love to interview you for this, for this job, you can say, you don't want to say, oh, well, I'm not there yet. I'm in the what you would want to say is, great, I'm really excited about this. I'm actually currently out of the area, or I'm currently in Washington, D.C., but I would be happy to do either a virtual, a Zoom interview, a virtual interview of your choice, or I could be there by, and whatever, if you're willing and able to, get there, right? Hightail it and get there, driving, whatever, right? So that's exciting when they want to interview you, because it means you're one of the top candidates that they're actually looking at, and from that they make their usual selections. So that's, you've gotten through that first hurdle or barrier. Okay. I think this is an important point to make. Don't count on a relocation package. You're not always going to get that. Sometimes they will pay relocation for people, when relocating, it's an executive or something, and there's a relocation benefit in it. But many times they don't, and especially now, I think, when so much of the onus is on the person that wants to, the job. You're gonna, if you're willing to come here, you come here. It may be limited, if any. So just know that as well. But you can try to negotiate it in. Um, did the screen just disappear, folks? Sorry, not sure why that happened, but hold on just one second. I don't know why let me just stop here for a sec. So sorry, something's acting up with my Zoom, because the Zoom chat box doesn't want to stay lit, and now my share screen just popped off, but that's okay. Let me get it, back here real quick. Are there any questions? This is a perfect time for somebody to maybe share a question orally, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and just share your question. I would love to hear that. Anyone? All right, take a moment otherwise, and here we go. All right. It just kicked me out of that altogether. I have to re-sign into Google. My goodness. That's all right. We'll do that here while you all are hopefully thinking of questions you can ask. Okay, we are back in action here, and let's try to reshare my screen. All right.
Hey, Jodi.
Yes.
Thank you so much for hosting this today.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, would it be appropriate to list, like, in the process of relocating to Washington, D.C., or like in the process of relocating to New York City, just like at the top of the resume?
Yes, actually, that's one of the things you can do. Relocating to New York City or Washington, D.C., and then the date, like whatever, and hopefully it's fairly soon, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yes, you could absolutely do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for jumping in with that. I really appreciate it. Okay. So let's continue on here, and so get a local address. This is what I was talking about before, and this is kind of the alternative to that. When you were, just sharing that there, the question, you could use a local address in the new city, because either it's, it's not you. I guess I never advocate for lying in a job application, right? But not but, and your local address, whatever that local address is your address. Like, that is your local address for you and your job search, and where you're going to be, where you are, or where you're going to be, relative to that position and opportunities that you're seeking. So that can really help. Tapping your connections, I've already mentioned, right? Really kind of tapping them to tap their connections, and there's just so much that can come from that. And then lastly, I do want to say, explore opportunities to take your job with you. Some companies, like, let's say you're in a situation where, you are working and you really do like your company, but maybe your partner or spouse is, they just got this new opportunity, and it's, far away. and you're going to be going, right? To remain a family unit and be there, but you hate losing your job. Well, one thing you might be able to broach with the company is, you can be honest with them and say, "Hey, I am, as you know, I love my job. I really love my job and I'm passionate about what I do. Da, 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 da. My partner has just received an offer for a position that's very hard to turn down, and it's in XYZ location. Is there any way I might be able to temporarily or long term, or you could say any way I might be able to continue doing my job, as I demonstrated was very possible in COVID times and such, remotely, either temporarily or long term. I really would prefer to stay with you. I don't want to leave, like that. You can sometimes, you can describe it like that, and they might take you up on it, especially now that COVID has been through, or we're going through COVID, where everyone is teleworking and people are realizing they can get their work done. So, um, you can consider doing that as well. Okay, great. Let's go on and see what else we have here. So, relocating for a new job, right? This is the opposite. We've been talking about like doing the remote, right? Doing the long distance, um, and or going there and continuing the job search. Now, the relocating for a new job. Let's say you got the job promotion, or you got a job. You did your application. You said, "Hey, I want to live there. I'm relocating." Whatever you've shared. You've got the job, and now you're deciding to take that job, right? Okay, relocating for this job. Am I going to do it? Right. Um, it, there's a lot that you want to factor in. I caution you to not just take the job. I mean, it's exciting. I know it's exciting when you get a new job, and especially if you've been looking for a long time and you've had difficult periods where you felt, really down on the process and worried that you're not going to get a job and just all of those things. When you actually get one, it's easy to be like, "Oh my gosh, I got a job. Yay." And just boom, I'm going to take it and just, sign it, whatever, and take it and go, right? So, what I urge you to do before relocating for a new job is obviously, know, like, you've obviously looked at, or if you haven't, look at the actual location to see what the cost of living's like, things like that, right? How is the education system? And that's one of the maybe implications on a family if you have a family, or, what's, the market like out there, salary, how are salaries? Like all those things are important before you accept that job, right? And some of that you want to do your research before you go into your salary negotiation, if they're talking about salary, so you don't get undercut, or you don't just say, "Oh, that sounds great, I'll take it." And oh, well, it's 30% higher to live out here and you got a 20% raise. So you just took a pay cut, which may or may not be worth it depending. And, but you want to try to, negotiate for what you can in that. Doing your research about just everything about the location to kind of make sure that this does seem like a fit, that you would like it. Oftentimes this is when it's not necessarily your dream location that you've always wanted to go to, but rather this exciting opportunity comes available and it's in wherever, it's somewhere else, and you're like, "Wow, do I take this? Okay, we got to kind of think, how would I do there? What's that kind of stuff." So try to negotiate the moving expenses as possible. And I put an asterisk on that because, as I said, sometimes they're not as open to negotiating anymore, in or oftentimes with for the moving expenses themselves, or it might be limited, but just see what you can eat, what you can get, right? You never know. And whatever they come out with in salary, like when they come out with your salary, it would behoove you, don't talk salary until they want you and they've offered you the tentative offer, and then you get into salary negotiation, right? If at all possible, avoid putting out your salary. Rather, if they ask you, even in the application materials, like in your cover letter, explain what your salary requirements are. Instead of saying, "I'm looking for a salary of," and putting in that whatever figure it is, consider saying something like, not at the top, but rather kind of toward the bottom, "In regard to your request for salary, you know, um, levels," or, whatever, you could say, "I'm looking for a salary that's commensurate with my XYZ skills and proven commitment or expertise in the blah, blah, blah sector. I'm happy to discuss more specifics upon learning the projected range for this position." That way it puts it back on them. And then they can give you the range, and then you can work your way up a little bit. If you just come out with the set salary, you could be undercutting yourself. Maybe they would have offered you more, or maybe you're coming in too high, and that's gonna impact. Who knows? I mean, you want to kind of put it back on them if you can. Okay. Um, and sometimes if they ask you too early in the process, about your salary, or what your salary expectations are, requirements, you could even say, you could kind of come up with that. I'm looking for commensurate, a salary that's commensurate with my experience. Happy to provide. Or you could even say, I need to, or I would like to get a little more information on the specific aspects, or of the position, before I can fully come out with an appropriate salary or expectation, something like that. You can also do that. Okay. So that's exciting too, but just try to I know this can be a real, I mean, like I said, people can relocate for the wrong reasons, or because it's this job and then they end up hating it, right? I remember relocating once for an opportunity, and I thought that I was doing it for great reasons, right? It was right after Peace Corps, coming back, and it was going to allow me to be close to my family. I'm from Iowa. Des Moines, Iowa is, the bigger city there, at least, but was going to be closer to my family, be able to, spend time after 3 years being gone with my, nieces and nephews, be more an active part of their lives. I was going to be jetting to Chile, Argentina, Mexico, and Spain, because it was this international marketing position. So I totally got myself wrapped into why this made sense to do for a short period of time. And I was miserable. And it was more because the actual work did not speak to my values of, what and how much, Peace Corps had impacted in so many ways. And so I hadn't really thought fully through, okay, I'm going to be talking with, the richest of the rich in these countries, in many of these countries that, are trying to protect their assets from, as opposed to working with the, underserved, population from Peace Corps. And so my heart wasn't in it as much, right? And so make sure you do a really good job of kind of researching those kinds of things as well. Okay. Um, all right. And then let's see. I have a question in the chat box I'm going to take here, and then I'm going to ask for any other final questions. Dump those in, and we'll go ahead and answer those before we end. So, RE salary, Sarah shares, it varies, but if you're moving to a lower cost of living area, is it still reasonable to use your salary from higher cost of living area as a baseline? Yeah, I mean, I would try not to take, a cut, right? I mean, I would certainly put out, they're going to realize that that's in a higher market, an industry, right? So they may or may not be able to meet it, but you could certainly, when you're negotiating, saying, I've been at, this level and earning this, the costs of living were, well, cost of living is higher than they're, you don't want them to go to that point. Well, that's why you should take a 30% decrease. But I would put out, I'm looking for the, XYZ to whatever range based on my proven experience in this. And if they come in with, with a lower amount, you need to say, well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I will need to spend a little bit of time researching a little more specifically regarding, cost of living implications, here, and other, other aspects. And I'm happy to, I'll get back to you by whatever. So you can kind of, it might be this negotiation where they come in, or you come in, they come in a little bit lower, you come in a little bit higher, and you land on that something in the middle, right? Too many people leave benefit dollars on the table, and that's why I did actually a webinar also, and there's so much online on this as well, on how to negotiate for, salary, how not to leave benefit dollars on the table. You do need to factor in sometimes other kinds of costs, like maybe their salary is less, but they pay 100% of the insurance. That's a huge difference in your medical expenses, things like that. So you've got to look at all the different benefits too. Maybe they have paternity leave, which is progressive, and not every company has it, right? I mean, so there, if you're looking to start a family, that could be worth a lot, right? Having, I mean, it just, or maternity leave, whatever, So those kinds of things can factor in. So I hope that answers your question, Sarah. If there are any other questions, this is the time. We are already, time goes very quickly in these sessions, but any other questions that you'd like to either drop in the chat box, or even, just just unmute yourself and share with me. I'm happy to answer any final questions. So thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and we hope that you can incorporate some of this advice, and please let us know if there's any kind of questions that you have. We're always looking to help in any way possible. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend.